there who have ever been pregnant, something changes in a heartbeat and you can't predict what it's going to be or how many things are going to change, but it just does. For me, what changed immediately was like, I just got this massive, like, whoosh, knowing, like, I don't want that business anymore. I'm done, which was terrifying because I didn't get it. Like, I loved what I was doing. I totally loved it. I was in love with my community. I loved the business that I was creating. I felt I had finally clicked into place, but I just knew that that was the truth. I was like, okay, this isn't me trying to self-sabotage. Like, I really don't, I'm done. And in that very scary space of trying to figure out, like, okay, well, if I'm done, what am I going to do? Like, I don't get this. Like, what am I supposed to be doing?
Welcome to the Wealth and Wellness All Women Rock podcast, hosted by me, Tamara, the CEO and founder of All Women Rock Global. Join me on this journey as we explore topics, conversations, and interviews related to wealth and wellness. Let's get started. Hey girl, hey, welcome back to another episode of the Wealth and Wellness podcast by All Women Rock. On today's episode, I have a special sweet treat for you. This is actually a recording from our Women in Podcasting Summit that we had on last month. The episode today will be an interview I did with the beautiful, talented Katie Krimitsos. She's the founder of the Women's Meditation Network podcast. She has over 14 podcasts and over 100 million downloads. During this interview, you'll get to see how Katie was able to pivot during a time in her life from one business to another, how she was able to increase her podcast sales, and so much more. I even shared with Katie how instrumental her podcast was for me during a very, very dark place in my life. This episode is so good. I could not hold it only for our Women in Podcasting Summit. I wanted to share it with you guys too. So let's take a listen. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us back with the Women in Podcasting Summit. I am here with the beautiful Katie Krimitsos from the Women's Meditation Network. Thank you so much for joining us on today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. Congratulations on the summit. You've got such an amazing lineup of speakers and really beautiful people here who are contributing. It's awesome.
Yes, thank you so much. For those that are unfamiliar with Katie, she is the creator of the Women's Meditation Network, a collection of 14 podcasts. That is amazing. They bring special guided meditations to women all over the world. She's a mom of 2 young girls, loves a good margarita, and wants to save all the animals in the world. She has over 100 million downloads with her Women's Meditation Network. I can personally say, from experience, her podcast has helped me get more calm, better sleep, less anxiety, and more happiness. Once again, welcome to the Women's in Podcasting Summit, Katie.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you. So I kind of wanted to dive into like questions and answers with you, getting started with the Women's Meditation Network. As you know, with Women in the Podcasting Summit, some are here that have already launched a podcast, thinking about launching a podcast, or just women in business in general. So they have questions as well. Some of them have already submitted their questions to me.
Yay. Okay, good. Bring it on. Bring it on.
Oh, but I want to kind of go back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you had an original podcast before you started the Women's Meditation Network, right?
Yeah. I've been podcasting since 2014.
Okay.
Which means I'm sort of like a great auntie in podcasting. Not really a grandmother yet, but I've been around for quite some time. And back then it was a business show. It was called Biz Women Rock. And it was kind of what I think a lot of us who step into podcasting, this is generally what our podcasts look like. It was an interview show. And it was used as the marketing arm for the business that I created out of it, which eventually became, I was a business coach and strategist. I helped women build their companies from point A to point Z or wherever they wanted it to go. And I provided any type of service that would allow them to do that better. So masterminds, one-on-one coaching, courses, memberships, live events, all sorts of stuff. I mean, like the gamut, I did it. So yeah, I was doing that from 2014 until I finally put it to bed just shy of its 6-year birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was like the reason for like kind of wanting to stop with that one?
The only reason I wanted to stop it was because in 2018, well, I'll kind of paint the picture. So it was January 2018. I had just in the prior year hit like my first 6-figure year. I was like, yes, I'm awesome. This is clicking finally. I got it. Had a very clear plan in January of that year for like tripling business. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew by that time I got it. Like I knew who my audience was. I knew what they wanted. And I was planning to launch all of the things. And so fast forward, Q1 completes and I'm hitting all the marks. We're getting there. And in April of 2018, I find out we're pregnant with our second daughter. And for any of you out there who have ever been pregnant, something changes in a heartbeat and you can't predict what it's going to be or how many things are going to change, but it just does. For me, what changed immediately was like, I just got this massive, like whoosh, knowing like, I don't want that business anymore. I'm done, which was terrifying because I didn't get it. Like I loved what I was doing. I totally loved it. I was in love with my community. I loved the business that I was creating. Felt I had finally clicked into place, but I just knew that was the truth. I was like, okay, this isn't me trying to self-sabotage. Like I really don't, I'm done. And in that very scary space of trying to figure out like, okay, well, if I'm done, what am I going to do? Like, I don't get this. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? That's really the space where the Women's Meditation Network idea came about. And that's when I started being able to say like, okay, well, let me play with this. What could it be? What could this thing be? And if I were to go forward with this, like what kind of check marks does it check? You know, like what would this do? And so that's when this whole network was really born. This whole idea was born. And that was 5 years ago. And I didn't immediately say goodbye to that business. It took me about 1.5 years of sort of trailing it off and doing both. And so like for about 1.5 years, I was managing 2 businesses, 2 babies and doing all the things and finally sort of putting one to bed and being able to go full force with the other. So.
Wow. That's so inspiring.
I don't know about inspiring. I think all of us in our business journeys, again, you're here because whether you're in podcasting or you're thinking about podcasting, there's some sort of a business idea behind it, which is what you're really addressing, right? And so, I think that really the call for all of us as business people is to really like come into ourselves and really understand who we are and what we want. And more importantly, to understand that like it can all change sometimes in a heartbeat, just like that. And sometimes gradually where something doesn't feel good anymore. And so, you kind of have to twist and change. So I think it's just a matter of being really honest with yourself. And I'm someone who's always been very honest with myself. And even as scary as it might be, this just knowing of like, I can't stay in this just because it seems like the right thing to do. And believe me, girl, a lot of people were telling me like, you're nuts. Don't you dare start this new thing. You're dropping this other thing. Like you got a good thing going on here. Like, what are you doing? And beyond all of that noise was still this really loud voice. I was like, no, you got to do this. You're done with this. You got to do this.
Yeah. I say it's inspiring because I know for myself and I know other women that sometimes we don't even respond to that little nudge and we know what is working. What we have is no longer serving us. And it's just like, I don't know if I want to take that risk.
I know. It's scary. Yeah. It's so scary. But I feel like I've been really lucky that I've had a lot of practice listening to that voice. And then more importantly than listening to that voice is taking action on that voice. Like I can, I was raised by really awesome parents who raised us to be pretty darn independent and making choices for ourselves, right? I feel like they had to. There were 6 of us, so they were just like, "Oh my God, I don't care. Do whatever you need to do." But I feel like I literally have a very distinct memory of like being 18 and making some serious adult decisions for myself at the age of 18, and in calling up my parents and asking for advice. What do you think? I remember very clear communication was like, you know what's best for you. Do it, follow your heart. Everything's going to work out.
Yeah.
And I imagine that now as a parent going, oh my God, do you know how hard that was for my mom to say or my dad to say, like, to let me do it, to let me make the decision, take all the responsibility and figure it out. And and at the age of 18, I was making really big adult decisions like that. So I have flexed that muscle a lot. I'm 44 now. Like I have flexed the muscle a lot to know to listen and to hear. And I have a meditation practice. I have a journaling practice. I have practices that allow me the space to practice listening to that voice. But then also, again, more importantly, like, what am I doing to act upon it? And I've just had I have a lot of muscle memory there to know that I could literally, and I have, do a complete 180 from what I have been doing yesterday, and I'll be okay. Like, I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. I know I've had experiences with women before, and this was me previously, that they don't know how to, or myself, we don't know sometimes how to listen to that voice that's within us, because sometimes we've had so much failure, we don't trust ourselves anymore.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point, a vantage point of why you don't listen to that voice. There's a gazillion reasons why we don't listen to that voice, right? Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, I really just want to say that this is one of the reasons I think women are so special. Like the amount of intuition and knowingness and connectedness we are engineered with, is really magical. And there's also a gazillion reasons why that we're told or we're taught or we practice not listening to that, right? So on that particular, reason is like, oh, I've failed so much. I don't know if I should listen to myself, if this is going to be the next big thing, or if this is just yet another one of the things that I'm going to try and fail at, right? To that point, I feel like it's twofold. Number one is it's this dismantling of failure, because I would stretch to say that in all of your failures that you've had, this, because the exact same truth is for me too, they've all taught me something, right? And they've all gotten me to the next place and helped evolve me to this next version of myself that now is sort of standing at a new place, and I'm ready to make a new decision based on what I've learned, right? And so, for me, it's just a matter of like, I could have very easily said that about myself, because I have been on this entrepreneurial journey for about 14 years now. And nothing I did before this really clicked in the way that this is clicked. And so I could have very easily told myself, and I did, like I had those thoughts back then at that transitional point of like, am I sabotaging myself? Is this just the next glitzy, big thing that I'm going to go after and I'm going to fall flat, or not even that I fall flat on my face. Is it going to just like, poof, like do its next thing? And now I've wasted another couple of years doing the next thing. Right. And so I sort of had to just like sit with all of that stuff and really tune into like, is any of this true? Or does this feel really good? And the truth of the matter is I didn't know if it was true or not, but I knew the knowing of I have to do this, and I do have a clear vision of it, is strong enough that I have to listen to it and just let all that stuff go by the wayside. And guess what? If this does become another quote unquote failure, well, at least I've become somebody who's lived through that, who's learned from that. And now I'm somewhere else that I need to be. And I really, truly, and I would imagine you agree with this too, I can look back on all these failures and see how they've all lined up perfectly to lead me exactly to who I need to do this that I'm doing right now.
Yeah. You are so right. You're right.
Yeah.
I agree. I would kind of want to talk about when you launched the Women's Meditation Network. I know that you currently have 14 now. Which one was the first one that you started with?
Yeah, it was the original Meditation for Women.
Okay.
And I launched that show. It was July 2018. Yeah, very much like, let's see what happens. Yeah.
Okay. So what meditations did you offer in that one?
My approach here, so it's important to sort of paint the picture of the landscape. So I had done enough research in the podcasting space to know that, like, I knew what my landscape was. I knew what the niche looked like, meaning if I went in 2018 and typed in meditation and women, only one podcast existed, only one, right? And I was like, I can't believe this is 2018. I can't believe that there's only one. And so part of me knew that there was an enormous opportunity there. I knew I could totally, I knew I had a lot to contribute to this space. So my attitude with that very first one, even though like I knew like this is going to be a network, I know I have a ton, I think I brain dumped on like 25 or 30 different types of podcasts that I could have. But I was like, let me just launch one. I'm pregnant. I have a toddler. Like I can't even, I have another business. I can't even fathom, two at this point. So let me just do one. So my intention with that one was to be kind of a catch-all. So if I'm as broad as meditation for women, what kind of meditations could I have? I could have sleep meditations. I could have meditations about confidence, about self-love. I could have meditations about quieting your mind. Really ultimately about all these things that I wanted to tell women that, and I feel like you and I have very similar missions in this, in that like, I want to have these words in this experience, make sure that they hit the heart of the woman who hears, I am enough. I have everything I need within me. You got it. Go for it. Take the risks, dismantle the fear, those things, like quiet the thoughts so you can hear your voice, like that kind of stuff. So that's what it started out with. And actually that's what it still is. There's kind of an array of everything on that particular show.
Wow. Like I've stated, it has helped me tremendously. Listen to your podcast. I'll get to a point eventually where I'm able to share, but in October of last year, I was just like numb and just kind of went on day to day, just how am I going to make it? How am I going to be a mom to my kids? And just being able to look at your podcast and see a wide variety of like, okay, this is going to help me go to sleep. And it truly, truly has been a heaven sent for me with just like, you got this. And just being able to take it one day at a time, because I know as women, we have so much up here and family and kids and drop-offs and soccer, and just like, I can only focus on one thing at a time. And just Seriously. Being able to calm my mind and listen to your podcast has really, really been a amazing heaven sent for me.
Oh, thank you. Then that's exactly why I do it. Cause I'm like, I feel that. I know other women feel that. Yeah. And I know that this tool of meditation done in a really special way can be really powerful. So I'm so grateful for that.
Yes. Do you often get like reviews or people reaching out to you with those stories?
Yeah. And they vary as far as like what the impact has been, but it all distills down to the same thing. Like either something like that, like, wow, like these meditations have been my only sacred space for myself. And they've been so special and magical. Also, like, I feel like you see me because you're saying these words that like, I didn't know other people felt, but you feel them obviously, which is, I think, a special gift of mine, is wanting to universalize the kind of experiences that I have and wanting to be able to share. And then also like I get, which is incredibly special, I get this comment a lot about like, you are the mother voice that I never had. And this is sort of this motherly voice that I needed to hear, that I didn't even know that I needed, and I need it. And it's really special. So that, and obviously the obvious, like you help start my mornings well, with our morning meditation, or, you help me go to sleep and then I can function and be myself the next day. So yes, the answer is yes. And those are what continue to fuel me and confirm that I'm exactly doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Yeah. With podcasts, and sometimes it can be a slow journey, or for some others, it can pick up pretty fast. What was like, as far as like your download growth or listeners was like, this is working?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is I have two very different case studies to pull from, right? So I have Biz Women Rock, which was what I would consider like a slow growth, and then in a hustle. And then the Women's Meditation Network, which was different and unique and sort of like took off from the get-go. With Women's Meditation Network, so Biz Women Rock, back in sort of like the good old days or the olden days of podcasting, it was there was a lot of intentional marketing that I was doing on the front end to sort of like get seen on all the podcast players and all that sort of stuff. So it grew quick, but then like kind of like just leveled out. And so we were, after 6 years of podcasting, we averaged about like 5,000 downloads a month, which is very respectable, supported a very healthy business for me. And so knowing those numbers, I went into Women's Meditation Network, and by the third month, we hit 5,000 downloads for the month. And I was like, okay, universe, I guess I am on the right path. And that's sort of what I've always used the download numbers for. Like, am I still where I'm supposed to be? Because it's just like one of the many metrics that, can really confirm, yes, I'm exactly where I'm doing what I should be doing, or where else should we be? So that was kind of a really big milestone moment. And then, so that was October 2018. March of 2020, if you remember, was the beginning of all the pandemic craziness. And I was already by then putting out meditations about COVID, about the uneasiness of that, because my husband was feeling it. Like, everyone around me was feeling it. And so I was like, I've got to put this stuff out there. I'm not, obviously, like, this is worldwide. I'm not the only one feeling this. And then obviously in March, I put out a bunch of them. I still only had the one podcast back then. And that month we hit 100,000 downloads. And that was a giant jump. Like, we had been growing since, we had started, but I remember like that January, maybe we had like 50,000 downloads or 60,000 downloads. So now 2 months later, we're at 100,000 downloads. And I was like, oh my God, my mind was blown. I was like, I couldn't even fathom that number. Right. And so that was another milestone. And I feel like 2020 was a pretty pivotal year, because that was the year that simultaneously I started that year having let go of Biz Women Rock. So I was completely done with that. No responsibilities there. My kid was now a year old. So I was like kind of out of that initial 1 year mommy fog. And I sort of like had my wits about me, and I could like now focus just on the podcast. And then the pandemic hit, and I just felt like, okay, there's this wave coming, and I better get on my damn surfboard, because I plan on being on the front of that wave. And that's really what happened. And so the growth came from a couple different things, but very, very specifically, like growing new shows. And I had to really check my mentality about that, because, one show is this amount of work. So 2 shows must be double the work. And then 10 shows must be 10 times that work. Right. So I really had to really check myself on that limiting belief and say, no, I could do 2 shows and it doesn't have to be double the work. But how is the question? How am I going to do all this? So the second show I launched was Sleep Meditation for Women. And that literally was because I used Meditation for Women as this giant science experiment, and would constantly look at my analytics and my download numbers. And I would see a lot that, like, okay, 8 out of the top 10 episodes are all sleep related. So eventually I was like, I've got to have a whole sleep show at this point. And so, back then it was like, well, how am I going to do this? I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and like, we're in like, it's lockdown. Like, how am I going to do this? And so I decided, okay, I'm going to just seed it with all the other episodes, like 20-ish episodes that I have already, do once a week. And then by the time it comes time for me to have to make new content, maybe I could put out like 1 a month. And within a month, Sleep Meditation for Women skyrocketed, like just skyrocketed. Obviously, big need there, right? And so I was like, well, so much for not creating new content for this. I got to do more. And I just felt called to do more. So I just kept doing more, and like, okay, I'm going to be doing like 3 originals a week on this show. Like, how am I going to do that? So anyway, my point being in all of that is that was sort of the moment that mentally I sort of opened up to, I could grow more and I could expand the network as a method of growth. And then one by one, I just started launching shows. So like for 2 years, I only had 1 show, and it's been the past 3 years that I've gone from 1 to 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the questions someone submitted. She wanted to know, how do you, like, with you having 14 shows and a family, like right now, how do you manage it?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. And my biggest answer to that is I'm always asking how I can scale without dissolving my values, if that makes any sense. Like you and I both, we have really strong family values. I'm not giving up more time with my kids in order to grow a business. Like that's just not going to happen. And yet I also refuse to believe in the fact that I can't grow and be hugely impactful, reaching millions and millions and possibly billions and billions one of these days of women, while I have to give up family time. I refuse to believe that dichotomy. So, but the pressure's real, very real. And so it is an enormous amount of time management, energy management, managing when is best for me to do things. My values are on my calendar, meaning that like if I say that my family's important to me, like I'm really good at, I'm really bad at what do they call it? Like doing two things at once.
Yeah.
Whatever multitask, I suck at it. I'm horrible at it. I'm constantly stressed out because I'm not fully here and I can't really listen to you here. And anyway, so it's like, if I'm momming, I'm momming. Like I'm not working. If I'm working, my kids are away from me. They're not even in the house. Like I don't want them here. I want to work. I want to be in that energy. So for me, it was really, it has been from the get-go, establishing what are my values and then how am I going to build a company and a working culture around those values. Yeah. Practically speaking, though, I want to be very clear. Every podcast that I've launched has been very strategic in the sense of how can I do this? I think it was like the first 4 or 5 definitely were all 100% me. And then it was like, I built up to this capacity where I was like, I have no more capacity. So how? I still want to grow. So how am I going to do that? And so it became a matter of, there were a couple different strategies. One is sort of the obvious, like, okay, I need to hire other people, right? I need to hire other people to write, other people to voice, other people. I mean, I haven't done production myself the whole time, but like another producer, right? Like I need to hire some stuff out. And the second how actually became like, well, can I repurpose some of my content and just repackage it in a certain way that feels really good and actually is a big win-win-win? So we have a couple shows out of those 14 that is 100% repackaged content. It is not like they're not, I don't consider them what I would say originals. So for example, we have a podcast called Panic Attack Meditations, very specific topic, right? And so I basically have gone back into my catalog and I have got at least 100 episodes that are either panic attack specific or they are specific to those moments of high anxiety, really intense overwhelm. And so all of those go on the panic attack meditation. My approach to this type of growth is like, I'm doing, and I've heard this from the audience, I'm doing the audience a service by putting relevant content in playlists, if you will, easy for them to find. They don't have to go dig into 5 years worth of a library in order to find what they need. And boom, I'm just putting it there that are kind of heavy with keywords. And I'm going to be there in the space that you're looking for. And I'm just curating that content that I have after all these years in order to put it there. So to end, I'm going to be very clear. These 14 podcasts are not 100, like they don't each have their own scripts, their own voice. Like I'm not doing every single piece of them. And some of them actually we're just repurposing content. It just takes, my operations manager to program it and to put it here and to go there. So I actually don't do anything for it. So and those ideas have only come about because I've asked that question, how can I do this? How can I completely bust through that limiting belief that I can't grow and have littles at the same time? I can, and how can I do that? Oh, is there some way where I can, take the content I already have and put it somewhere? Yes, I can do that. And that would be really beneficial. Right. So, so I would just encourage everyone to always ask those questions, like how can I do it?
You're so right. And I feel you on the multitasking. My kids often make fun of me because if we're in the car and they're asking me a question, I'll turn the radio down. Like, why you turn the radio down? I can't listen to that and hear you at the same time.
Same. Oh my gosh, I'm the same. I turn into a frustrated mess. I'm like, I don't know. Who's that? You just 12 asking me for one thing. Hold on.
Yes, so I definitely can relate to that. One of the other questions that one of our Access Pass members wanted to know, with the Women's Meditation Network being so huge, have you thought about expanding to possibly live events or a live show?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes. The answer is yes. I've thought about that since the get-go, especially because I've had experience doing live events. In the first couple of years, I did not want to. Like, I came from a business model that was very heavy on live events. And so I was like, I don't have it right now. I need to be with these little babies right now. It's been in the past 2 years probably that I've actually reconsidered, like, okay, is it time for a retreat, a meditation retreat? Is it time for some other type of live event, or, an event where I can bring listeners together and do live meditations and have this really big impact? So it hasn't been a big enough yes yet, but it's getting there. I can feel it. So yes, the answer is it's coming up, and it's been bubbling for a while.
Yes, I will most definitely be there and be a part of that.
Yay.
For those of us that want to monetize our current podcast community, can you share more about like the premium offers that you have and the meditation bundle?
Yes. Okay. So it's worthwhile to note that when I started the Women's Meditation Network, I was very intentional about it being a very profitable and prosperous business, which is a very important mindset to have, because as a creative, we can often get stuck. And I only know this because I've been this before. It took me a while in the Biz Women Rock years to actually be okay with making money and making a business out of it. And anyway, so I say that now because if you don't already have that mentality of like, yes, it is okay for me to have this be a very prosperous business and I want to do it very intentionally, then there's some work there. Now, from that being said, I also gave a lot of thought about what type of business model that I wanted to create. And so I had all this experience doing very hands-on services, like high ticket item type of things, right? Retreats, high-end coaching programs, all this sort of stuff. So I kind of went into this business knowing like, that's not what I want to do right now. What I want to do is do a more traditional media company that required an enormous amount of downloads and numbers in order for sponsorship and ad dollars to make sense, right? And that was scary in and of itself. But I was like, I don't care. I'm going for that. Because that to me seemed more passive than actually doing a high touch kind of an offer. So as my business model lies right now, here's how it looks. A good portion of the revenues that we have come from ad dollars. And so my number one call to action is always getting more listeners, because more listeners, means a better and more impact to the women listening, but also means that more and more advertisers are interested in coming to me, and they're interested in buying more and more of those of the ears, right, of those ad spots. So that's one big thing. And even in that advertising kind of bucket, there's a couple different types of advertising. There's host-read ads that I can do. There's programmatic ads that I can do. There's all sorts of creative things that I can do in there. So that's sort of one of the biggest things that I do for revenue. The other thing that I have now is a premium membership. I know you had mentioned that too. So I offer a premium membership that allows people to listen without ads. And so there's technology behind that, all that sort of stuff. To me, it was sort of my first precursor to, should I have an app? And let me experiment with this tool first to see if enough people would want ad-free content. So that's been really good. That's been a good source of revenue. And then what I had done since the beginning that is sort of morphed over the years is doing these bundles like the woman had asked. So what I got clear on was that my meditations themselves are the product. And so the question that I still always ask am, how else can I package my meditations? How can I package this so that people will buy? So that I can offer it to people in a way that where they are, because they're not all on podcasts. So how can I offer it in a different way to different markets, all that sort of stuff. So I have some bundles, just a handful of bundles where I'm, it's like the peaceful sleep bundle. And it's like, 10 different sleep meditations, or the morning bundle, or the daily affirmation bundle, or what have you. So I have a lot of those, and they do okay. It's probably a couple $100 a month. But what I started doing just a couple months ago was actually like making each individual meditation available for purchase for like 99 cents, on Apple or what have you. And I haven't really seen those numbers come in yet, because there's always like a delayed thing, but that's just another kind of like variation of that. And then another part that we have now is what I call like, where else can I put my content? So I actually partner with a couple different meditation apps where I am the contributor or the coach or whatever verbiage they use. And then I get paid based on how many of their people actually listen to my meditations. So, some of them are just, I don't know, under $100 or something a month. And some of them are pretty lucrative on what people are listening to. So that's another option. And then there's just a lot that I haven't dug into yet, that I just am like, just now sort of like, okay, what are we going to do about this particular product and this particular product and this program and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot I don't do, but that kind of gives you a general, I think, description of the business model that I do have.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Also, when you kind of were mentioning about how you have the different podcasts where it is the daily affirmations and the morning meditations, that's one thing that I absolutely love about it, because I listen to podcasts a lot. And with yours, I can easily find what I'm looking for versus just scrolling up and down trying to find it. So that is very helpful, just being able to have those different categories.
Good. It's working. Yeah.
What advice, this was another question that we got, what advice would you give to someone that may be struggling with their downloads?
Well, the very first thing that I would say as a little bit of tough love, because I've had to tell myself this before, which is whatever you've been doing has not been working. So in order for things to change, you need to change. So that means, what can I do that I haven't done yet that might be a little creative? And for me, this is all just marketing and growth, right? So it comes in two buckets. Do I want to pay for it, or do I want to put my time into it? Those are two very distinct buckets. So from the get-go, and neither is right or wrong, but it just depends on what you need to be clear from the get-go on what you're going to do. Am I going to pay a certain amount of money in order to try and get listeners, or a little bit of money, or am I going to put a lot of my time in? Because you have to do one or both of them, in my opinion. From the perspective of Women's Meditation Network, just by nature of where I was in my life then, about to have a baby with a toddler, I knew I wanted to spend more dollars than I had time to spend. And that doesn't mean a lot, but from the get-go, I was like, okay, how can I spend $100 a month? How can I spend $500 a month? Whatever that might be, right? So what I would do in advice, I'll share with you a couple of things that we did, but what I would do for anyone listening who's just like, hey, my downloads aren't growing. I would ask yourself what you could do, how you could spend time, and how you can spend dollars in order to expand your audience. And then the second question is always like, who else has my audience? Who else has the ears of my audience? So to really identify two of the biggest growth tools that have worked for us, number one is actually paid ads. So meaning, where am I paying for ads? Now, this spans a couple spectrums. One is like on current podcast apps. So Spotify, Apple, you can't pay for ads on Apple, but that's an app. Podbean, Castbox, Castro, Podcast Republic. Like there's a gazillion, most of us know the two apps, right? But there's a gazillion different podcast apps. And many of them, you're able to actually pay for listens. You're paying for like some sort of a banner on there so people can click through and listen and become a subscriber. And most of them have really good analytics, meaning you can spend, the very first ad I ever did here was $75 on Overcast. So we're not talking a lot of money. And it was enough for me to experiment and see like, okay, for $75, I got X amount of subscribers and X amount of downloads. Was that worth it to me? And if so, let's do it again. And if not, let me try this one over here. So paid ads, not only on podcast apps, but also like on Facebook, like on Instagram, like where else can you pay to have your billboard out there in front of people who are ready to click and press play? So ask yourself that question. Doesn't have to be a big budget, but it's a really good way to start experimenting with where are your people. And another creative way to do this is you could, by asking yourself, where are my listeners already? Are there any owners of groups like Facebook groups or any other sort of organized groups that you can pay to do some sort of a advertisement in front of their groups, or you could pay to be interviewed in front of their Facebook group or whatever that may be. So that's one option. The other thing that has worked really well for us that's free is doing cross promos. So again, answering that question, who else has my audience? Look around you right now. Look around, like do your research on your podcast app. If you go and look up your own, if you're in Apple Podcasts and you go look up your own podcast, scroll down to the bottom and it'll have a section that says listeners also listen to. And guess what? Those are the other podcasts that your listeners are usually listening to. So it's worth a reach out to some of them. Now, this gets a little tricky in that typically ideal cross promos work when there's a similar audience, a shared audience, right? But also shared size. And you don't really have any way of knowing that. So believe me, I've reached out to people similar in size, meaning, hey, I get about 5,000 downloads a month. You get about 5,000 downloads a month. Can we exchange? Because that makes sense, right? My early years, I was reaching out to a friend that I knew who got like 3 million downloads a month, and I was at maybe 200,000 a month. And gratefully, he was a friend and so kind. He's like, "Sure, Katie, let's do one." And I didn't know until we started getting into it, and I was like, "Oh God, that's really awkward." He's being so kind, right? But so it doesn't hurt to ask, but just be conscious of that. So, like, are there other similar brands, others who have similar audiences who a cross promo looks like this? Like, hey, I'm going to come in and do a host read ad, at the beginning of my show or mid roll or whatever for so-and-so show. You guys got to go check this out. It's such a great thing. And it's perfect because my audience would really need it. And then they're going to do the exact same on my show or on their show. And so up at this point, there's probably about 4 different. I do cross promos very regularly, a lot, constantly looking for new people to do cross promos with. But there's probably about 4 of us who, at least, like, I'm constantly, like, every month we have a cross promo going on, and that constantly gets me in front of audiences that I don't have. So those are just 2 really great strategies that I think can work. But ultimately, it starts with that those questions of, how much am I going to pay? How much time am I going to give? And where are you on that scale? And then also asking yourself, like, where is my audience? Where else are they?
Those are all really great, because I didn't even know about the ads with the different podcast platforms that you mentioned.
Oh yeah, they're great. And a little note before if you want to do this, I mean, some of them flat out only offer like the paid ads, right? But some of them might offer a featured section, like Spotify, Apple, because you can't pay on Apple, but Spotify and Apple, and I think Podbean, I think Castbox does this. They all have sort of staff picks or like some way to be featured. So before you even spend $1, you can submit yourself to be featured. Now, I don't know who's in charge of picking those things, so you might need to submit a lot, but that's how I got started on this, because I submitted to be featured on one of the podcast players, and it was a smaller podcast player. But in the 3 months that they featured me, they were supposed to take me down after a week, but they kept me on for 3 months. And in those 3 months, now granted, they weren't a huge amount of my downloads, but in those 3 months, I saw from that podcast player, I saw that my download numbers triple. So then I was like, okay, how can I pay you? Like, what ads do you like? Now I'm willing to spend some money because I see that people are coming from your app. So if there's any way to get featured as well, like, that's a really good mid step too.
Those all are amazing. Thank you so much, Katie. I've learned a lot for myself, and thank you for taking time to even answer our All Access Pass members their questions.
Yeah, of course.
Very, very informative.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm so grateful. I love podcasting. I think has the potential. It's such a beautiful industry where you can just be 100% you, find your tribe, attract your tribe, and really let it be a very prosperous and abundant experience. And I think it's a lot of mistakes and bumping up and kind of like squirming your way into where you're supposed to be. But I promise you, like, it all can be very, very beautiful. And it's just a matter of sticking in it and learning everything you can along the way.
Yeah, I love it too. I originally started in blogging in 2009 or 8, one of those.
Yeah.
And once I learned more about podcasts, and I was like, let me give that a try if I can use the same writing and take that and put it on a podcast platform. So I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you once again for joining us. I hope in the future we can still, maybe one day we'll be able to meet.
I think that would be lovely. I think that would be amazing.
At the retreat, we're going to speak that into existence.
I know, man. Now you're giving me more fire about it. So I'll let you know when it goes live.
All right. We'll let you go. And everyone, be sure you download the Women's Meditation Network. As I stated, I was really hoping I didn't cry on here because if I could just really just explain like how much it truly helped me throughout the day. And I previously stated on one of the episodes that for me personally, it was always journaling and prayer. And what I was going through, none of that was working. My mind was not still. I couldn't focus. I also have anxiety. and depression and all that was just coming up at the same time. And then like a month later, I found out I was pregnant. And I've always been a fan of Allison's Food Heals podcast. And that's where I'd heard about you from. No, at the Podfest.
Yeah.
Podfest. And then when I heard it again on her podcast, I was like, let me give it a try. Yeah. I was like, I actually ended up falling asleep listening to it. And I was like, okay, I'm listening to it in the morning. And it kind of helped me get through the day. So it was helpful. It grounded me to help me each and every day, just being able to take that one day at a time. Like, you got this. Shit is crazy, but we got this.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful. It feels like I'm so grateful that I feel like a part of me has been with you on that journey and, continues to be.
Yep, it is. And it's very helpful. Your voice, I hear your voice going to sleep and waking up.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, girl. I'm so grateful.
All right. Well, I will let you go. Thank you once again for joining us on the Women in Podcasting Summit.
Of course.
All right.
If you made it this far in the episode, it shows you are interested and committed. If you want more of Wealth and Wellness, tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. I would love for you to subscribe and share. Your experience on this show means a lot to me. I want to welcome you to click the link in the show notes to leave us a comment or a question. It's speakpipe.com/allwomenrock. The link is listed in the show notes. You never know, you just might be on our next episode. Be sure to follow us on all social media channels at All Women Rock Global. Until next time.